Hey friends, gather close. Tonight, Moat want to tell you about an old soul named Winston and a tired, stray dog who had run out of places to go. The cold city rain lashes against the concrete. The flicker of a broken street lamp casts shivering shadows, and there is a quiet whimper coming from the shadowed corner of a narrow apartment porch. The trusting, exhausted eyes catch the dim yellow porch light, asking for just one night of peace. You probably would have walked right past him. In a busy city, most people did. If a story like this softens your heart, take a quiet moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely love what we share here at Liu Te Man channel. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from tonight.
Just a moment more.
And the name of an animal that once changed your life. So pour yourself something warm. Find your softest blanket and let the world go quiet. This is a story worth hearing slowly. Winston had lived alone in his ground floor apartment for nearly 12 quiet winters. The world outside was a blur of rushing headlights and the distant rumbles of the subway line. But inside, his life was marked only by the ticking of a grandfather clock and his evening tea. He had stopped believing the forgotten strays of the world would ever stay long enough to become family. And yet, on a Tuesday evening in November, the universe gently proved him wrong. Winston opened his front door just a crack to retrieve his evening mail.
Come on in, you're getting...
The sharp smell of wet asphalt and damp autumn leaves immediately flooded the small hallway. There, curled into a miserable ball on the worn welcome mat, was a dog. He was a large, heavy-boned mix, his once dark coat heavily dusted with the unmistakable gray of old age. He wasn't shivering from fear, but from a bone-deep weariness. Around his thick neck hung a frayed, faded green collar, dangling loose by a single stubborn thread. As Winston pushed the creaking screen door wide open, expecting the animal to bolt, the old dog didn't move. Instead, he simply let out a long, shuddering sigh and gave his tail one tentative thump against the wet concrete. It was Tahar, an energetic greeting. It was the polite, tired acknowledgement of a guest, hoping not to be a burden. Winston knelt down slowly, his old knees popping softly in the damp chill of the night. Well now, he murmured, his voice a gentle whisper.
Barnaby?
You a long way from a warm fireplace, aren't you, old-timer? The dog lifted his head, hesitating for only a fraction of a second, before leaning his heavy muzzle directly into Winston's weathered palm. It was a beautifully simple gesture, yet it carried the overwhelming weight of absolute trust. Without another word, Winston fetched his thickest wool blanket and draped it carefully around the shivering body. The earthy smell of wet fur mixed instantly with the comforting scent of old wool. With gentle coaxing and a soft, encouraging whistle, Winston led the weary shadow over the threshold. He locked the door behind them, shutting out the relentless drumming of the cold rain. The silence of the apartment, which had felt deeply isolating for years, suddenly felt wonderfully warmer. The transition from the cold, wet streets to the quiet sanctuary of Winston's living room happened with a slow, unspoken understanding. The old dog, whom Winston gently named Barnaby after a few days, name that felt round, soft, and unhurried, didn't pace the floors or whine at the windows. He seemed to come from nowhere else. He seemed to know exactly how to exist in a space that had been achingly lonely for so long. By the end of the first week, they had established a daily rhythm dictated entirely by the deliberate, measured pace of two aging souls navigating the winter of their lives. Barnaby would wait patiently by the scratched kitchen cabinets while Winston prepared his morning oatmeal, sitting perfectly still except for a soft, huffing sneeze whenever the steam rose too high from the stovetop kettle, as if offering his own mild, gentle opinion on the morning temperature. The rhythmic hiss and clank of the cast iron radiator quickly became the soundtrack to their shared evenings, filling the small apartment with a dry, comforting warmth that seemed to bake the damp city chill right out of Barnaby's weary, stiff bones. The faint, slightly metallic scent of the heating pipes mingled beautifully with the earthy, floral aroma of Winston's brewing chamomile tea, creating a lingering perfume of absolute domestic safety. It was during these quiet, lamplit hours that Barnaby revealed his most endearing habit. Whenever Winston settled deeply into his faded floral armchair to read the evening paper, Barnaby would lumber over, circle the braided rug exactly 3 times, and drop his heavy body down. Then, with a long, rumbling sigh, he would slide his large, graying muzzle forward until his chin rested perfectly across the soft tops of Winston's worn plaid slippers. It didn't matter if there was a plush blanket nearby. Those slippers were his chosen anchor. If Winston ever needed to gently shift his foot to reach for his mug, Barnaby would simply shuffle forward without opening his eyes, determined to maintain that warm, heavy point of physical contact. Sitting there with that comforting weight, pinning his feet to the floor, Winston often found himself lowering his newspaper, his eyes quietly tracing the silver hairs, framing the dog's soft ears. He had spent years feeling like a forgotten relic in a city that moved entirely too fast outside his window. Yet, looking down at Barnaby, he realized he was just sheltering a stray animal. He had found a true companion who inherently understood the quiet dignity of simply being still. They were 2 old souls who no longer needed to rush anywhere, perfectly content to let the rushing world hurry on without them. The frayed green collar from their first rainy night remained loosely draped around Barnaby's thick neck. Winston hadn't the heart to remove it yet. It felt like erasing a tangible part of the boy's quiet history. Instead, he just gently tucked that single stubborn thread behind the brass buckle whenever it tickled Barnaby's chin. Sometimes, lost in deep sleep, Barnaby's thick paws would twitch in slow motion, and he would let out a muffled boof that always made Winston smile softly into his teacup. Trust didn't arrive. With a grand, sudden gesture, it seeped into the room slowly, filling the empty spaces between them, as natural and inevitable as the evening shadows stretching across the floorboards. Winter deepened, locking the city beneath a low, iron-gray sky. Their afternoon walks were never about distance, but rather a slow, shared ritual of stepping outside the warm apartment, pushing through the squeaky apartment door. A sound Barnaby had quickly learned meant it was time for his favorite repurposed wool blanket coat. They would shuffle down the block side by side. The biting winter wind carried the harsh scent of exhaust and distant bakeries. But Barnaby didn't mind. His quirky routine was set. He absolutely had to pause at the third rusted lamppost on the corner, pressing his nose to the freezing metal for a full minute as if carefully reading the neighborhood's morning news. Winston would just wait, his gloved hands buried deep in his pockets, offering a soft chuckle at the dog's solemn dedication. They had made it only halfway to the small corner bakery on a particularly bitter Thursday, when the fragile rhythm of their days shattered. The gritty crunch of rock salt beneath Winston S. boots was suddenly interrupted by a dull, heavy thud. He turned, his breath pluming in the freezing air, and saw that Barnaby hadn't just stopped to sniff the icy pavement. The old dog's back legs, weakened by years of surviving the hard streets, had simply folded beneath him. Barnaby didn't cry out. He just lay there on the cold concrete, looking up at Winston with a soft, apologetic expression, as if embarrassed that his tired body could no longer keep a simple promise to walk to the corner. He gave his tail one feeble thump against the ice, a brave attempt to reassure the frightened old man. Panic, a feeling Winston hadn't experienced in years, flared hot in his chest. The protective bubble of their quiet living room felt entirely too far away. He dropped to his knees, ignoring the sharp cold seeping through his trousers, and wrapped his arms around Barnaby's thick neck, taking care not to pull the frayed green collar. "It's all right, old-timer," Winston whispered, his voice trembling slightly against the freezing wind. "Mutt got you. Mutt met right here." Looking down at the graying muzzle, resting helplessly against the salt-stained sidewalk, Winston felt a sudden, profound ache. He realized in that agonizing moment how entirely this gentle creature had filled the hollow spaces of his solitary life, and yet it comes from nowhere else. He had spent his evenings dreading the silence, and now he was terrified of returning to it so soon. And yet it comes from nowherever, with the help of a kind delivery driver who had parked nearby. A young man who didn't hesitate to lift the heavy, quiet dog gently into the back of his warm van. They made it to the small, brightly lit neighborhood clinic down the avenue. The sterile scent of the waiting room was a harsh contrast to their chamomile and wool-scented evenings. As the vet technicians carefully wheeled Barnaby behind the swinging white doors to examine his failing joints, Winston sat alone on the hard plastic chair. He stared blankly at his own hands, desperately missing the comforting, heavy weight of a chin resting perfectly across his worn plaid slippers. The grandfather clock in his apartment, which he usually used to measure the quiet hours of his day, felt entirely useless now. Time was no longer measured in hours, but in the agonizingly slow opening of those white doors. He rubbed his thumbs together, trying to hold on to the memory of the dog as warmth, praying silently that their story was meant to end in this unfamiliar room. The agonizing hours in the clinic waiting room ended not with a miraculous cure, but with the gentle, quiet truth about old age. The veterinarian had spoken softly about arthritis and tired hips, offering pain management instead of promises. Winston brought Barnaby home, wrapped securely in his thick winter coat, heavily supporting the dog's weight against his own side. "Hi." When they finally pushed through the squeaky apartment door, the familiar, protesting groan of the hinges felt like a joyous victory trumpet. The sharp, sterile smell of the clinic still clung faintly to Barnaby's graying fur. But the moment the dry, comforting heat of the cast iron radiator washed over them, The familiar scent of brewing chamomile and old wool began to fiercely reclaim their shared space. Their world had to change, and Winston adapted with a quiet, unwavering dedication. The daily, freezing walks to the third rusted lamppost were gently retired, replaced by slow, heavily supported steps just beyond the porch. Inside, Winston's rolled up any slippery runner rugs and spent the afternoon dragging his own heavy mattress from the bedroom into the living room, placing it directly onto the floorboards. Barnaby watched this frantic remodeling from his spot on the braided rug, giving a soft, approving huff through his nose, as if he had been suggesting these very interior design changes for weeks. The old dog's legs were undeniably unsteady now, but his gentle spirit remained beautifully stubborn. He quickly developed a new, highly specific quirk. For his modified routine, he simply refused to drink from his ceramic water bowl if it remained on the floor. Instead, he would gently nudge the heavy bowl with his nose until it chimed softly against the table leg, waiting patiently. He would only lap the cool water if Winston held the bowl tilted at precisely the right angle, allowing Barnaby to rest his heavy, graying chin comfortably against the old man's knee. It was a tiny, quiet demand for closeness, perfectly disguised as a need for assistance. As Winston sat there, holding the water bowl, carefully adjusting his grip to avoid pinching the frayed green collar that still hung loosely the dog's neck, a profound sense of peace settled deep in his chest. For a decade, his biggest daily concern had been whether the morning mail had arrived. He had convinced himself that an empty, completely uncomplicated life was a peaceful one. But looking down at the absolute trust swimming in Barnaby's cloudy eyes, Winston realized the immense privilege of being relied upon. Caring for this tired boy was an exhausting chore. It was the most important, heart-filling work he had done in years. By evening, the tiny apartment felt perfectly calibrated to their new, slower reality. Barnaby couldn't quite maneuver over to his favorite floral armchair anymore, so Winston simply brought the comfort to him. He neatly placed his worn plaid slippers right next to the floor mattress. Sure enough, with a slow, contented groan, Barnaby shuffled over, circled twice, and rested his heavy muzzle across the soft plaid fabric. As the grandfather clock ticked away the evening, Barnaby's rhythmic snores eventually grew louder than the brass pendulum, filling the shadowed room with the most beautiful grounding sound Winston had ever known. They were home, safe from the cold, and that was all that truly mattered. As January quietly surrendered to a damp, gray February, the entire universe for Winston and Barnaby compressed beautifully into a 10-foot radius around the floor mattress. The squeaky apartment door rarely opened anymore, shutting out the relentless rush of the city. Inside, the world slowed to a crawl. The old grandfather clock still ticked steadily in the corner, but the true metronome of their days became the deep, rhythmic rise and fall of Barnaby's breathing. The air in the small living room felt permanently thick and cozy, heavily perfumed with the familiar, comforting scent of old wool and the sweet, herbal notes of the chamomile tea. Winston continued to brew faithfully each evening. Barnaby could no longer stand without significant help, his back legs finally surrendering to the heavy weight of his years. but his gentle, stubborn spirit remained untouched. He developed a new, absolute requirement for their shared bedtime, no matter how comfortably. Winston arranged the heavy blankets. Barnaby would gently paw at the mattress edge, letting out a soft, whistling breath until Winston extended his left arm. Only then would the old dog carefully, deliberately slide his heavy, calloused front paw completely underneath Winston's wrist, tucking it securely as if anchoring them both to the floorboards. If Winston accidentally shifted in his sleep, breaking the connection, a soft, protesting grumble would rumble from the dog's chest until the wrist was promptly returned. It inevitably meant Winston woke up every morning with his arm completely numb. He would sit up slowly, wincing with a mild, silent chuckle, quietly massaging his shoulder, while Barnaby continued to snore blissfully beside him, utterly unbothered by the disruption.
Well, good morning to you too, Barnaby.
Winston wouldn't have traded that stiffness for the world. For years, he had viewed his slowly shrinking life as a quiet tragedy, a slow fading away from the vibrant, noisy city outside his window. But now, grounded to these scuffed floorboards by the warm weight of a tired dog, he felt an overwhelming sense of abundance. He hadn't lost the world. He had simply distilled it down to its purest, most beautiful form. All the affection he thought he had forgotten how to give was right here, safely held in this tiny, warm space. Even in his extreme frailty, Barnaby's internal clock remained remarkably sharp. At exactly 7 o'clock each morning, if Winston hadn't yet stirred to fetch the water bowl, a cold, wet nose would press firmly and decisively against his cheek. It was a highly polite but entirely non-negotiable demand for morning service. "All right, Your Majesty," Winston would whisper, his voice thick with fondness. He would gently lift the heavy ceramic bowl, carefully tilting it, so Barnaby could rest his graying chin comfortably against the old man's knee. They spent their long afternoons listening to the soft, crackling hum of the radio, with Barnaby's chin always resting nearby on the familiar worn plaid slippers. Whenever a particularly dramatic, sweeping symphony played on the classical station, Barnaby would inevitably let out a long, loudly vibrating sigh right at the crescendo, effectively critiquing the orchestra with his deep, raspy voice. Winston would just smile warmly, gently rubbing the soft, silver fur behind the dog's ears, always taking care to smoothly bypass the frayed green collar. Their small room wasn't a sick room. It was a sanctuary of profound peace. The final week of March brought a late, heavy snowfall that miraculously muffled the endless roar of the city outside their window, blanketing the usually gray streets in a rare, pristine white silence. The squeaky apartment door remained tightly shut against the draft, sealing in the deep, herbal scent of chamomile and the dry, comforting heat of the cast-iron radiator. By now, the world for Winston and his tired boy had shrunk entirely to the very edge of the floor mattress. Barnaby's breathing had grown incredibly soft, a fragile, rattling rhythm that filled the quiet, shadowed room with a sense of gentle finality. Even in his profound weakness, the old dog absolutely insisted on his quirky evening ritual. With a monumental, shivering effort, he lifted his heavy head, nudging his graying muzzle against the familiar worn plaid slippers Winston had placed neatly by the pillows. Then, he let out a tiny, whistling breath and extended his thick, calloused paw, waiting patiently until Winston slipped his hand completely underneath. Only then did the dog let out a long, contented sigh, safely anchoring them together to the floorboards one last time. As the grandfather clock ticked slowly toward midnight, Winston noticed the frayed green collar, which had hung loosely around Barnaby's neck since that first rainy night, seemed to be awkwardly pinching the soft fur under his chin, the single stubborn nowhere else. Stubborn thread that had held the heavy canvas together for months had finally, quietly snapped. "Let's get this off you, old-timer," Winston whispered gently, his voice thick but remarkably steady. He carefully undid the tarnished brass buckle, sliding the heavy collar away. It felt remarkably stiff in his hands, holding the phantom weight of years spent wandering in the cold. As he laid the worn canvas flat across his lap, smoothing out the frayed edges, the soft glow from the bedside lamp caught something hidden on the inside of the band. Winston squinted, adjusting his glasses. There, heavily faded by years of rain, but undeniably stitched into the fabric in pale yellow thread, was a single word. It was a phone number or a desperate street address. It simply read, Barnaby. A soft, astonished chuckle escaped Winston's lips, quickly followed by a warm, silent tear that tracked slowly down his weathered cheek. All those months ago, when he had softly tested out names in the quiet kitchen, the old dog had simply nudged his hand at Barnaby. And yet it comes from nowhere else. He hadn't just politely accepted a new name. He had quietly guided the old man to the truth. They had known each other all along. "You knew, did you?" Winston murmured, gently rubbing the velvet soft silver fur behind the dog's ears. "You were just waiting for me to catch up." Barnaby didn't open his cloudy eyes, but he gave his heavy tail one final, incredibly gentle thump against the mattress. There was no pain in the small room, no fear of the dark outside. It was perfectly warm, heavily perfumed with old wool and absolute safety. Sometime in the deep, quiet hours of the early morning, as the city snow fell silently outside the glass, Barnaby simply let out a long, peaceful breath that didn't catch again. He slipped away exactly as he had arrived, quietly, politely, and completely surrounded by love. The old grandfather's clock continues its steady, unhurried rhythm in the corner of the small ground floor apartment, quietly marking the passage of time in a space that feels entirely different now. As we slowly pull back from the quiet room, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casts long, gentle shadows across the wooden floorboards. Outside the frosted glass, the vast city slowly begins to stir with the very first pale light of dawn, the rusted street lamps flickering off one by one, leaving the snow-covered avenues incredibly quiet and still. Winston still sits by the frosted window each evening, quietly sipping his warm chamomile tea, but the aching, hollow loneliness of the past 12 winters has not returned. Instead, his heart is completely full, permanently expanded by the memory of a heavy, comforting weight resting across his worn plaid slippers. The frayed green canvas collar now sits safely on the mantelpiece, a quiet, beautiful testament to a tired boy who wandered out of the cold rain simply to change an old man's world. It is a beautiful, enduring truth that the immense love we unconditionally give to the forgotten souls of the
That's just
streets
perfect. Thank
never
you, Barnaby.
truly leaves us. It settles deep into our very bones, keeping us incredibly warm long after they have finally gone to rest. It comes from nowhere else. The heavy paws that anchor us in the dark remain perfectly, permanently tethered to our hearts. Thank you so much for sitting with us tonight, and for holding quiet space for Barnaby and Winston. Wherever you are right now, as the screen slowly fades to black, take a deep breath. Pull your soft blankets a little tighter. Hold your own rescued friends a little closer. And know that there is always profound warmth waiting to be found, even on the coldest city nights. End of story. Sleep gently, friends.
Behind the footage you've just watched lies the independent creative effort and dedication of our entire production team. Every detail in this video has been carefully edited and meticulously refined. We are committed to delivering original content, strictly avoiding copying or reusing content in any form. Furthermore, all information is rigorously verified to ensure absolute honesty and eliminate inaccuracies, providing you with a complete and trustworthy experience. Thank you for watching and for your continued support.